Well, I'm sure that all of you marked your brain to keep your place from last time. We were talking about such interesting and weighty matters as primary and secondary emotions, how secondary emotions must either be talking about themselves or be being talked about, and how explanations can be seen as being one form of the supreme talking about of everyone, of all the forms of what kind of guy I am, or other people being induced, as it appears, to talk about what kind of guy you are. That these kind of explanations, and how explanations, right where we cut off, if all of our collective memories serve us, was that even when you get to explanations, under ordinary conditions, explanations are at best, the way it operationally works out, they are at best attempts at treatment and will not facilitate cures, inasmuch as they're not supposed to, and all the many angles in which I've tried to get you to consider this. So now, to pick up in the place where we were, that I had in mind at the time, if I still had one, was if you consider even under the most up-to-date city conditions, in the midst of all intellectual sophistication, right now, having to do with the matter still that I just summarized from last time, the kinds of intellectual institutions that you would consider to be in the forefront of the matter I'm about to point out, such as psychology. Note this, even they do not attempt to address, nor even name, which if you're getting better is even a further extension of such, if they were capable, if that was part of the city ordinances right now. They do not address the question of any possible energies, drives, forces below what they are wont to refer to as the intellectual subconscious level. It is really tied up in the easiest, most profitable description I submit for the time being is just refer to it as consciousness. I know they divide it up, and nowadays it appears at times to some people who are less aware, less interested, that it is a new division, but it is not. It's simply renaming of the same old, in this part of the world, the Judaic-Christian idea of two forces pulling at man. And all ideas of psychology is just a variation of that, which is all a variation of my variation of referring to it as the partnership, the dialogue, everybody talking to themselves. I don't talk to myself. Do you think? Yes. I rest my case. And of course, most people wish I had not left my case there. But no, there's a difference between thinking and talking to yourself. Okay, I'll check back with you. You're right, and let me know when you've got it figured out. But there is a specific area in which there is, I'm going to try to expand your looking at it, assuming you're trying to, that note psychology, psychiatry, and even bleeding over now, I guess, into the field of neurology. But there's still this continuing interest they say they have in what's going on in the human mind. There are drives, there are motivations that any reasonably intelligent city psychologist, psychiatrist, if I had him locked up in a closet and tickled him, for a few seconds I could get him to admit that, yeah, based upon our clinical observation, based upon the statistics available, based upon my training, based upon my own observations and suspicions, I will admit that there has got to be something even below, beyond, but let's use below us, there are kinds of terms. There's got to be something below, something driving, a kind of engine driving even the most subtle, the most unconscious, the most subconscious activities, thoughts, feelings of everyone. That if we take it down to whatever the most up-to-date level is, whatever the newest variation of the Freudian paradigm is, let's still just say the subconscious level, that there are things going on inside of a person's psyche, inside of a person's psychology, that makes them do things. especially when they seem to be inexplicable to institutional life. That is, why will people do things that are patently self-defeating? Why will people smoke, drink? Why will people be so clumsy as to continually hurt themselves? Why would somebody do that? And a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a reasonable person will go, there is no reason. There is no reasonable reason. There is no sane reason. It is not possible for a conscious, a fully functioning human to do this sort of thing, to commit what amounts to continuing little episodes of self-destruction. Thus, whatever is driving this person has got to be below the threshold of consciousness. You're all aware of that. Years ago, they said Lot. Of course, later versions of that book, they claimed the man was drinking, but that Lot was out there doing dastardly things. But he had an answer. Even before Cliff Wilson. The devil made me do it. Mr. Lot, why in the world, I don't know who's his first or last name, why in the world would you do such a thing? How could you stoop so low? And so you realize they got the goods on me. And then you did not have Freudian psychology terminology on which to fall back. And so all you could do, which flew for thousands of years, you went, ooh, the devil made me do it. Evil spirits. It was the same thing. So even now, whatever terminology, let's still just call it the subconscious, what I'm trying to get you to see, is life has never, and this is real subtle because I'm sure most of you would have thought otherwise if I just asked you point blank. Life has yet to arrange the intellectual activities of people, even those in the institutional area in the city apparently interested in studying such matters, to address, isn't that the way they talk? To address the problem, to even try to name it, to talk about the lowest level at which we have theorized, or they may even say at which we are sure, based upon statistics and observation and study of the pathological state of a lot of people that fell into our control. We are sure that there are operations going on inside of the psyche of man. And if I could tickle them more, they might say, okay, the brain, if you insist. That there's levels going on that makes people do things, and it's below the conscious level. They can't even tell us, which is why we have to charge $200 an hour to sit there and listen to this crap for 20 years, because they don't know what they're trying to tell. They cannot bring it up to the conscious level. All right, we know all that. But notice, nowhere does anybody discuss that can't be the end of it. None of Freudian disciples, no psychologist worth his publishing rights has ever stood up and said, well, wait a minute, that's all well and good, and we can keep studying and trying to bring out the subconscious, usually, if not always, self-destructive tinged drives that motivates people, besides their conscious best efforts, these that are down below consciousness, to bring them up, cleanse them, air them out, hang them out, shake them about, so that people can be loosed of these demons. Of these psychological traumas. And of course, being the decent sort I am, I would not look at the psychiatrist and go, they slipped up and said demons. Subconscious traumas and stuff is what I meant. I'd let it go, see, because that's just the kind of guy I am. I wouldn't rub it in. Especially since it's the same damn thing. But if I then said, as I was trying to get you to see, I could do it with you, you should be able to just refer to yourself, any reasonably intelligent, intellectual city person. And I could say, well, wait. Even if we got down to this great reservoir inside the individual and even humanity in general, but if each individual down to what you're calling the subconscious motivations, the bruises, the pushes, the shoves, the traumas that obviously, according to you people, have some bearing, a little, a lot, a whole lot, on each individual's activities that are not conscious. If we in fact brought them all up, raised the Titanics, cleaned them up to where everything that they now do is based upon conscious decisions, drives, motivations. Are you going to tell me that that would explain everything? I suggest it was just that psychiatrist and yours truly. I'm not going to tell. And he realized, since I didn't rub in this slip about demons, he probably figured that I'm an okay guy. That's psychiatry talk. So he might say, yeah, you're right. I don't go into it, he might say, because you're going to start getting left with all kinds of ideas of gods, or it's just going to leave me. I got nowhere to go. And if I say, well, do you find that strange? You're a man with several degrees, a reputation in psychiatry, psychology, and you've never thought before that if you get past what you consider to be the depth, below the conscious level, inside the human psyche or brain, that there would still have to be something else. You know, Dante had a father. I might point out to them that's kind of metaphorical closet talk. You figure it out later. And I would say, you don't find it interesting that you never thought about that before? That if indeed you cleaned up an individual or a whole troop of people, a whole nation, the whole world, you cleaned up everybody's subconscious. You brought it up to the surface to where no one had any unconscious drives, traumas, heartaches, dreams, nightmares. Are you going to tell me then that we'd be living in Freudian paradise? Are you going to tell me then that everything would be explained? Again, I suggest look at the operation of your own nervous system at that ordinary level. And for at least a split second, ordinary intelligence, the brain stem up to its ordinary building site level with ordinary people, for a split second would go, they might know what to say, but they would get a shiver like, no, that wouldn't explain it all. They couldn't hold on to it, they're not supposed to, there's no reason to. But note, not only has humanity never been wired up and primed to address that, but no one even notices it. Comma. It is almost, amongst other ways I was going to try to get you to consider this in a profitable way, it is almost as though life at times mercifully, see if I can do a kind of a spiritual gesture, mercifully. I guess I've watched too much TV because all the spiritual gestures I know, to me, seem to give some sort of subconscious message of send money. It's as though life at times seems to mercifully let man take no explanation as being the best possible explanation. Those of you that want to really slice it thinner, you could put parenthetically that the best explanation, at least, is not even an attempted explanation, which is closer to the example I started out with, in case you didn't think this was going anywhere. You don't see the connection? I just put a comma, I didn't change the damn subject. Even though I point out, I'll do it again right quick, even though I point out that it's not even common awareness, no one takes any notice of the fact that it's never been a matter of even speculation, much less anyone trying to get their doctoral, trying to make a reputation over saying, wait a minute, even if we do in some way, let's call it cure the problem of man's subconscious drives, energies that come through him in a way below consciousness, which is very risky. If indeed they're not always of a negative nature, if they're not always harmful, then they are at least unpredictable. That is not what we need for civilized 21st century men and women. We need people who are only operating by what they are aware of. And then if somebody consciously says, well, I'm sick of it, I'm going to buy the farm, at least we'll assume with the guy, now that we have cured everyone, in psychiatric terms, at least it was a conscious, knowing decision. He didn't do it simply because of the fact that the 14th time that he wet his pants when he was a kid, his mother says, sometimes you remind me of a beagle. And finally, 37 years later, he was watching TV, feeling depressed, and suddenly a Purina commercial came on, and he just snapped and went. Well, in case you never thought again, that take a side trip right quick, which is almost interesting enough to mention, which I'm about to. My opinion. Humanity will not allow that. That is, life will not allow it inside the mainstream, the middle of the bell curve of humanity, for that sort of thing to happen unnoted, unchallenged. Because from one view, look at it this way. I don't know how many people commit suicide a day, but it's not like it's not decimating the world population. Why is it that humanity is so concerned about somebody committing suicide? There's not that many. But why is there's an absolute outrage about it, and a great deal of interest about we must reach these people. What would motivate a man to sit there and take his own life? And as you people, maybe you on tape, if you ever see us on tape, this has nothing to do with morality and goodness and Mother's Day and sending Hallmark cards. But from one view, having nothing to do with the matter at the local level, at the ordinary level, but from one view, you could look around and say, well, listen, to pick another worldly example, not mine, but one that the city says is important, that they could say, well, right now, I don't know the figures, but I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands of people, probably, and little children starve every day. So why aren't we applying ourselves to that? Why do we care about one guy? He was living in a nice house here in the United States. He had a car paid for. His house was almost paid for. It's a shame, but he sat there and took his own life. He was 42 years old. It's a shame, but why are we so concerned about that when all these other terrible things are happening, as they call it? Why? I told you this was an aside. It's not only a why, but they insist. By they, that is the city itself, the major arteries in life's circulatory system via man, they insist that this is an aberration, it is an anomaly, and it is something, it is a sickness, and it's got to be cured. All right, if it is a sickness for someone to kill themselves, we're not talking about a damn plague. It's not like the Black Death sweeping over Europe. You know, it's hitting whatever it is. I don't know, the United States, 50 people a day? I don't know. But they look at it as though this is an epidemic, and if we don't find out what is causing this, you know, we could all be next. Which all of that, the reason you laugh, I assume, besides my cheap theatrics, you laugh because it's not true. We're not all going to be next, and it's not that big a problem if you looked at it statistically, if you looked at it comparably to other so-called problems. And yet, notice, it is looked at and considered to be a serious problem, not in numbers necessarily, but a serious problem, comma, and the problem is yet to be understood. That is, why would a person with a home and a car and a family kill himself? Well, it cannot, is one thing for sure. It was not his conscious decision. That's for sure. I mean, they know that. File that, put that in the folder and file it away for a little while, because we know that much. Why do they know that much? What I'm suggesting to you is they have got to know that much. Well, it's a figure of speech. They have got to accept the fact that this is anomalous. And it is below the level of consciousness. It is below, the explanation is, this is below someone's conscious decision. But note, no one asked. There is no consideration of, if we cleared all of this up, would that be the end of it? And I strongly suggest to you to check it with your own nervous system, that for at least a split second, people would say, and they couldn't explain it, certainly, because they've never even thought about it. They're not wired up. They do not have the neural ammunition and the patterns to think about it. But if for a split second they heard what I was pointing at, that, yeah, I've never thought about that, but now that you put it in words, that if we did obliterate, cure, treat, whatever they cared to call it, unconscious motivations in people, that would not explain everything. If it was just a split second, they'd see it. And if I could hold it maybe one more split second and say, weird, why you had never thought about it. And why they've never thought about it is tied to the side trip I took about why there seems to be such great concern, why humanity is made to feel such great concern over people taking the ultimate self-destructive act and insisting this cannot be a conscious decision, that this is an illness. But if that be true, why is it that humanity has not been wired up to even theoretically, for somebody just to sit around and speculate, somebody with some authority, with some influence, to begin to speculate that, well, certainly we have not taken care of all of the subconscious negative acts and motivations that drive humanity. We have not. But just sitting here thinking, if someday in the future we do, we'll assume we will, because we'll assume we can cure any disease, any illness, the kind of progress. There's no reason to assume that we cannot bring people up, clear up this cesspool, if that's the case in an individual circumstance, of unconscious drives. Why is it nobody sits around and speculates that, all right, let's assume that that will happen. Maybe not my lifetime, but my little grandchildren that are psychiatrists, maybe they'll see that day. But will that be the end of it? What if it's not the end of it? What if I just sit here and theorize? What if that's not the end of it? Maybe I'll write a paper on that. Nobody's done that. That might finally secure me tenure here. At least get me a few shekels out of a book deal, because that's a new idea. It has not happened. You don't find that interesting? That humanity is not even wired up, not even primed to think about it, much less address it, try and put a name on it. Now let's just deal with what we got. Now, of course, the unsaid part that enough of you, I can tell by now, can put sort of these things together. The kind of spend view I was trying to get you to see was one way to describe this, and it's no sarcasm for you people on tape, and it's no irony, but it will sound that way if you're just listening with two ears. Some way you can point it out. One way to look at why humanity is not wired up to feel this way is all explanations are incomplete. All explanations simply they're all episodic. The explanations of everything are as episodic as that which they attempt to treat. No illness can be cured, an illness can be treated, but the treatment lasts no longer than the ill, or vice versa. So, looked at from one way, I could put it to you and say, well, why in the world would life want to give man the further blues? Do you follow? This is a very crude way, but if you can see, of pointing toward it, is one reason not to let man involve himself in questions such as, all right, what would be behind, what would be below what we now assume to be unconscious drives, subconscious drives? What would be below that? And I point out that no one considers that. The question does not seriously, intellectually arise. And I've already given you the answer one way, about life's perhaps temporary mercy, with a certain amount of humor thrown in. But why, I'm putting it to you another way now, why would life make man even feel more confused? In other words, why let people worry about a question when they think the major question right now, unconscious, self-destructive motivations in man? We got our hands full, or psychiatrists in Arkansas like to say, we got more on my plate than I can say grace over. You'll have to check with your professors at Harvard to translate that. They got their hands full. Like, who wants to worry about what might be the subconscious drives below subconscious drives? Hey, we ain't got that figured out, right? It's like life's merciful interludes every now and then. So not only are people not driven to think about that, but although they do not put it in these words, is what I started out suggesting after my first comma, was it's as though, whether it be specified verbally or not, that sometimes life lets no explanation be the best explanation. You don't like that either. All right, how about this? Since we're all at the 3D level in the arbitrage queue, and let's assume that we are not on a flat, bland landscape, which we're not. There is a landscape, a topography that is not level, assuming your intellect is operating. Therefore, wherever you're standing, you cannot see the actual slaughterhouse. So there are little hills and there are valleys, and it goes around mountains. So, even though you may be standing there and someone has told you, or you may have suspected, that I know where this line is going. Notice this. Life keeps the arbitrage hidden. You don't call that merciful? Maybe not you people, that was rhetorical, but ordinary people. Same way intellectually. As long as people are, and the intellect is still growing, which is right at the heart of all of this, of course, the intellect is still growing, and therefore no questions are answerable. And those that seem to be answered are answered episodically. Inasmuch as there are no real cures, there are no solutions, only episodic answers, since that is the nature of the intellect, and all things growing is to be incomplete, but specifically in the intellect, as long as that's the nature of it, Why give people the further blues? Why even insinuate that, wait a minute, why would life do this? Run down through the genes, ending up a man right up here at the level of an Einstein great-grandchild. Would a person, a serious, ordinary person, and it not be a mutation, that is, it began to spread, would a person come to this kind of awareness? That it suddenly strikes me, I'm speaking for this grandchild, that if all the questions that plague men's souls, that men cannot answer, if they were all answered right now, that wouldn't be the end of it. If every friggin' one of them, every one of them was answered, that wouldn't be the end of it. Should I tell? You do not see that as a kind of mercy? You do not see that then as a kind of efficiency? Well, semicolon. I guess that'd be it. I was going to try and get you to take another glimpse of just a semicolon. A certain kind of different glimpse. If you can bring your eyesight up to the hillside a little bit. Or the method of, you recall, thinking more than you have to. There is a certain kind of more specified beauty and use that I was going to point out that may or may not have some connection with what we've already been talking about. Such as, if you think more than you have to, all right, I'm assuming everybody understands this. You just think more than you have to. You can't weasel your way out of it, and you can't imagine you can do it. You can't imagine whether you're doing it or not. Thinking more than you have to. One, that is some of the unspecified that are about to be specified. Kinds of uses, and I find to be personally a kind of intellectually topographical artwork on the landscape. But number one, I was going to point out, is you have leeway, you have access, you have the ability to go beyond all available explanations. And without it, or some other form, but let's just right now to make it simple, without using that kind of method, there is no such access. They're just not. They're not supposed to be. You don't even have access to ever begin to have those kind of questions formed in your head about what is psychology and psychiatry? What if the general level of avant-garde intelligence theory concerning man's intellect, psyche, psychology, right now, if all that was cleared up and all the questions answered, would that be the end of it? I've already pointed out to you, I assume you could follow it, this is not taking place in any sizable segment. It can happen to one person here and there, which is not the point, but it is not happening on an institutional level in the city. And if it happened to you, that would be seeing beyond. That would be having access beyond any ordinary explanation. And then you could go into areas like, well, that I keep trying to encourage you to do, that not only is that weird, but I'll tell you something almost as weird, now I think about it, is how come I never thought about that? How come nobody's ever thought about that? How come nobody in school, some crazy professor I had that was still smoking funny stuff back in the 60s when I was taking psychology, how come one of those weird guys didn't just one time kind of go into some kind of fit and go, hey, what if all these damn questions that psychology has, what if they were all answered? Would that be, boy, that'd be the end of us, right? Would we all work? No, we wouldn't. Gee, I just realized that wouldn't answer anything, would it? How come that nobody just did that accidentally? That's what you would find, I suggest to you, doubly weird. I mean, just to see that if everything was answered, that wouldn't be the end of it. That's like 87 octane. But you start getting into 92 octane to think, not only is that true, but what's even truer is nobody's ever thought of that, and that's weirder than the question itself. Or if you're actually keeping three-dimensional score, as weird. To think more than you have to, you can have leeway. You can find an access that goes beyond any available information. And as much as possible, I was choosing the words carefully, any. Because when you get to any explanations in the city, once you can get beyond them, as many of you already do, you understand that there is no legitimate way, there's no proper way to attack religion or psychology or patriotism or any institutional, any widespread accepted form of the division of intelligence, feeling, operations with ordinary people. There is no profit to pick out one and say this is better or this is worse. They're all the same. That is, you do not laugh. Now, this is not the way in the city. Even I'll admit that I don't think anybody followed that. In the city, if you're going to attack religious ideas about man, then you have an alternative. You know that's the way the mind operates. There has to be already the opposition. So if you're going to attack religious explanations of man, then you've got an alternative, or you wouldn't be attacking. Let's say psychology. If you're attacking psychology as being some kind of wild-eyed Harvard and Princeton liberalism that's going to destroy humanity and the family and everything else, then it's a safe guess that the man's fixing to raise the flag for the Southern Baptist or something similar to that. Some good conservative, orthodox, religious view, or he wouldn't be attacking. He's got some alternative. People do not run out in the field and holler out to hell with the home team unless they got the banner for the visitor. They just do not. So no matter, the reason I went through that was try to get you to see when I said all explanations, any explanation, it doesn't matter. Unless you can think more than you have to, it doesn't matter what explanation, because all of them are the same. And if you can't get beyond all and any of them, you got no access. You got no leeway. All right, number 2. I can play this game as long as you can. Well, until I run out of fingers and toes, I guess. Being able to think, continually trying to think more than you have to, number 2, will also free you from having any concern whatsoever over the lack of available explanations. Which is not the same thing as number 1, believe it or not. I'm encouraged by that immediate successful dance. I'll press on to number 3. You're also, number 3, if you're attempting to continue to think more than you have to, number 3, you are not automatically locked into some mechanical opposition to other explanations. I think that's a pretty good lineup. May not take on the classic Mets team, but number 1, you got access to explanations, to information, to thinking beyond any available explanations. Not a matter of degree, not a matter of the relative merits of an explanation here, one over here, or one in some historical period and one in another period. You have access to explanations that are beyond any of them. Batting second. You have no concern over the apparent lack of available explanations regarding anything. That's the one I just went on through because I don't know why I should go in there and muck about with that one. Batting third was that you are freed. You are not locked into this kind that everybody else, and you know it, you too, this automatic, this mechanical opposition to other explanations. And other is just as big as any, or, and all. It doesn't matter who. But if you are locked into your own explanations, they are in opposition to someone else's. That is not the general feeling a position on the playing field with people, people think that, conversely, that it's other people's explanations are in opposition to not just mine, but mine, which happen to be correct. At least more correct than these bozos. You're freed from that. Which is not some kind of spiritual freedom. It's not some kind of something to do a rain dance about. The point is, if you're freed from it, I was just going to suggest the possibility that you might be able to think anew. You might be able to think stuff that you never thought. But it's, as most of you know, this, okay, here we come the sales pitch about seeing your money. Nope. I was going to take a second. Those of you who know, is being able to think anew, there's no way to describe it. Because if this was a sales pitch for some kind of cult, or if it was a religion, or if this was some kind of institution, or if it was me having some kind of personal pitch to make, it has got to be in opposition to something. And even if I said, now look, I've got great new information here. The great new information is always, if it can be understood at all, as you know by now, is not new information, or it can't be understood. There's also new information that cannot be verified, because you can say, well, the new information is, I am in contact. After years of fasting and refusing to cut my toenails, I am now in direct contact, invisible, but direct contact with people from another universe. And they're giving me absolutely astounding new information, and for a small pittance, I will pass it along to you. And after receiving the pittance, large or small, the person says, all right, here it is, but don't you tell anybody else. These superior creatures, which you notice they're always superior. Does anybody ever notice that? That doesn't give humanity in general, even those who faithfully, those with a college education and a good Christian raising that read the tabloids, it doesn't give anybody kind of shivers to think, does that mean that everybody in this universe and every other possible universe, everybody's superior? Of course, Kyrud already covered that tonight. If you don't think you have intellectual inferiors, you know, you're somebody from another planet and you simply haven't landed on your home orb yet. Or as he so aptly put it, you have yet to be introduced to yourself. At any rate, the new information, it only comes in two ways. This is really, I know, an aside, but it still has to do with what we're talking about. If it apparently is going to be new information, which is not, if it's apparently going to in some way encourage you or show you or make you be able to think in new ways, it is not. Because one is, it can't be new. If it's one ordinary person talking to another group of ordinary people, then the new information cannot be new, or it'd be gibberish. It can't be new. But that which appears to be new has got to be unverifiable, such as the case I just made up covers it all, or I'm about to cover it all for you. The second part is already covered because the man says, or the woman says, I've got this great new information, and it will just light up your life. It'll just, make you feel like Buddha or Debbie Boone. It will spark your brain in such a way you'll be able to think anew. And the way I got it, I know you won't know how I got it, and I'll be glad to tell you, because you look at me and you figure I just like somebody just fell off of a turnip truck. And I'm not that great. I finished the 8th grade, but let me tell you what makes me different, what makes me worth your pittances and your shekels is this. For whatever reason, God knows, the people in this other planet, this other universe, are contacting me, these superior creatures. Did I say that? They are superior, very much more advanced than we are. They are sending me this new information. All right, he's covered the second part, which I'm not just making this up. If you're laughing at that, then you're laughing at your forefathers' religion. Yeah, but Moses actually, yeah. It wasn't another planet, yeah. Well, the bush talked to him. Yeah. And Muhammad used to go in a dark cave, which they never point out anything about those mushrooms and things, but he used to go in a cave, and an angel would say, hi there. And, at any rate, he's covered the second part, that I am getting direct, secret, new information from another planet. All right, you can't verify it. Nobody wants to. Those that would want to, those that want to debunk the man, are not going to show up. Those that laugh at the Catholic Church don't go to Mass. So it all works out. I'm sure life will appreciate me pointing that out again for the 47,000th time to you people. It all works out. But at any rate, those that need this sort of dance, this part of life that survives to some degree off this kind of energy, he's covered the part of what is going to be claimed to be new information. Is unverifiable to start with. That is, I am getting it. I didn't make it up. I wasn't taught it. I can't tell you. You know, they say, well, where'd you get this? And if you say, well, this other guy told me, my uncle, then they won't go see your uncle. They won't go start paying him the money or find out, well, he must know more than you. So it's got to be unverifiable. Guides flew for years. And now, just one variation is flying saucers, where I'm getting secret messages are being directly transmitted to my brain. So it's unverifiable. So if you want that dance, you can sit there and go, wow, God, how fortuitous to have met this guy. I've been reading the Inquirer now for 20 years, been out looking for flying saucers and nothing, and now, I never expected it. I just wandered in this little storefront place like a church, and there's a guy that's in direct communication with people. Well, he won't really tell us. He says he calls it Universe X. God, how lucky can you be? So they got that mark. So then he says, all right, now, since you've really given me, you got no more pittances to give me. And everybody said, we're cleaned out. And he said, all right, I'll give you the new information that they gave me. Now, the new information, you surely know the rest. The new information can't be new, or it will be absolutely gibberish. So the information has got to be, what's it going to be? They keep trying to come up, that is life, I don't mean the people. But life keeps coming up with variations that as soon as I do it, I know most of you will laugh again. But why are you laughing? If you're going to laugh at that, then you're going to laugh at the fact that there has been this kind of hard to identify salesman has been coming around to everybody's house for over 6,000 years that we know of, selling aluminum siding that won't stay up. He sold it to you, he sold it to your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, and he does it over and over. And if you don't watch it, he'll sell it to you once, and before you die, he'll come back and sell you some more, and it'll go right back up. So don't laugh. Don't be so crass. Don't, to go back to a fad that fell out of favor, do not streak us with your brain. Do not expose yourself by laughing. Because this guy says, all right, if you give me all your money and you can't get any more, I mean, everybody used up your credit card and loans, all right, here's the new information. But generally it's going to be one of these two things, is God loves you. Or these people looking at us and they want us to know that at least some superior creature somewhere are aware of our existence. That does not satisfy a lot of people. That is, that does not serve the kind of energy purpose in life's body in general. People normally begin to squirm a little bit like, you mean I run up my MasterCard and the machine shoot it up and I gave it all to you just for that? So the guy said, all right, that was really good news. There's another part of it. The rest of it is, they sent us word down here that if we don't watch it, we're going to just destroy ourselves. And then people go, oh, now, well, now I got my money's worth. They told us, or they told me to tell you people, if you keep on with this arms race. Of course, 1990, now there might be a few people in the crowd go, arms race, that's kind of old. Well, they told me the arms race, we've got to watch that, and I know they said we were getting a little better about that. And the, polluting the environment. And then you get more people going, I knew it. Then they figure, I got a bargain, I got a deal. I got new information. I got new information from sources that are unverifiable. Now I refer you back. Do you see that in a certain way, you could say that life mercifully, for its own purposes, at times lets no explanation apparently be the explanation. You mean I went about 150 miles out of the way and thought I would circle around and come in the back door of the city limits of that new place, and I only took a few of you there? You didn't realize what was happening? You didn't think I actually went off somewhere else. Well, all right. But besides those three, I should at least give a cleanup hitter, that is, of the previously unspecified beauties, joys, usefulness that I was enumerating for you under the recounting of the method of continually attempting to think more than you have to. Well, finally, in the cleanup spot, I was going to point out at least what I consider. Maybe you'll consider. I shouldn't say I. And I'm sure one of you will consider. That's it. Even the, for tonight, supreme beauty and usefulness of it. I'm pondering whether to actually do it. Either that or this is a screen test. Oh, all right. You can even think more than you have to about thinking more than you have to. Well, if I was going to continue to be melodramatic, I guess I could say I should be ashamed for doing that. But then if I was going to do that, I should peep up and to see if anyone actually got hit or hurt by that. But life being just and merciful, I don't guess there's any desire whatsoever to stop right there and linger about any more than I assume that a fireman likes to go to a weenie roast on his day off. But just to be sure that, for those of you who want to, that you did not mishear, I was giving as the fourth reason for tonight, benefit, beauty of the continual attempt to think more than you have to, is that you can even think more than you have to about thinking more than you have to. All right, I'll say one thing. And if you didn't follow that, that takes the first three and it wraps them up into a blueberry hand grenade. It takes it all right together. That you have access to explanations beyond any available explanation. You're freed from any concern over the apparent lack of an explanation. And you're loosed from any automatic opposition to available explanations. Altogether, I would suggest, could be wrapped up in number 4. All right, I was going to give or offer another little hand grenade method present since we're wrapping up the week here with the tapings. Say certain, I would suspect, surprising method I was going to describe, but not, sad to say, unrelated to what I was already talking about. And the name of it, the general tune goes like this. It's a method whereby you answer questions in such a way as to discourage any further inquiry for elaboration, but you do it in such a way that they will soon quit asking you any questions at all. Did everyone get that? It was nothing hidden or strange in it. It's just if you answer questions in such a way, a kind of unusual way, surprising way, a tricky way. But if you can do this and answer it in such a way that it precludes them from asking for any further elaboration once you respond, they will soon quit asking you any questions whatsoever. Is a fact. You've got to know how to do it. I was going to tell a little tale to set it up. I know a guy that used to receive correspondence from people, and they'd ask questions, and he'd write them back, and he could do it in such a way that even though that they would seem to have asked maybe a dozen questions and send a letter, and if you just looked down on the surface, and I'd seen some of it before, it's when I was using it as an example, and I saw the guy from one view could say, well, he didn't answer all of them. But you'd read the letter, and as it happened, and he pointed it out to me. It would go back, and he never received, like, how much I appreciate your letter, but it not only answered some of my questions, but it raised some new ones. Or would you please expand upon that most beautiful response that you did in third line of your... He would send them out, and they would apparently respond, by and large, to what they asked. But it had something in it that people would never ask for any further elaboration. Maybe a year later they'd send a new one and say, I just read your latest book, and I don't know whether you remember me, but I wrote you years ago, and I just read your new book, and boy, I'm just filled with whole new questions. Enough an example. Enough, apparently, of out there. Would you like to ponder the great, may I say grand, potential internal personal use of this with yourself? In the wonderful world interiorly, wherein you're talking to yourself. And those of you who don't talk to yourself, you're thinking to yourself. You simply have an alive, internal, psychic life. Or you wouldn't be here. You couldn't hear. You would not be the wonderful, intellectual, modern person you are. Within that context, within the framework of a dialogue going on, whether you think of it, if you were that still simplistic, that you think of it simply as your own intellectual activities, if indeed internally you could operate in such a way that what appears to be questions going on in here were responded to in such a way that wherever the source seemed to be of the initial question never got to the point that it never asked for any further elaboration. Would you be a little more specific? Would you comment on this particular detail? That it had asked a question, it got a response, and never asked for anything else. And it would soon cease to ask you any questions, not to give you some sort of outlined hint. What might be the possible use of that if you followed it this far? May I suggest that, if you could do that you might have, for instance, an end to squabbles over, I'm talking about the internal now, what appears to be the squabbles, the uncertainties over all the available explanations of life. No? All right. Number 2. How about this? Maybe this will sound more pertinent. If you could do that internally, would it interest you if I suggested that might put an end to such famous dances as guilt, remorse, and regret? If you can't answer a question, you can't answer a question in the way in which I am suggesting can be done, wherein the questioner does not ask for any further elaboration, and the conversation ceased, the dialogue ceased. May I point out to you internally? May I point out to you externally that we're not going to be able to get around to, I don't guess. It's impossible to feel guilty. It's impossible to feel any remorse about anything. You cannot regret anything you've done. You can't regret anything you talked about. You can't regret anything, period. Unless there can be a question asked. And there's got to be a response. And the response does not even have to be verbal. The question can be internally, did you do that again? And that will not stop an inquiry into further elaboration. Come on, folks, we got 4 minutes. You're going to fail me now. All right, ordinary people would think it's the voice of conscience, for instance, with or without religious connotations. And somebody just got through doing some dastardly deed in the darkness of their closet or somewhere. And the voice goes, did you do that again? And you go, ooh. To say the least, you are inviting, and I'm understating it, an inquiry, a further inquiry. Because if you go, then the voice says, Yeah. But why'd you do it again? And you go, and then maybe you begin to talk like, well, I know I said I wouldn't. And the voice says, yeah, we all know that. My question is, why did you? You swore you wouldn't. Unconscious, I don't know. I was weak. I was real tired. It's been the stress. I don't know what it is. If you respond in the ordinary way to all inquiries, I've got to suggest to you it is like furnishing Coke to an addict, booze to a juice head, words to an ordinary intellect, explanations to run-of-the-mill folks. As long as you'll respond in any ordinary way to the question, an ordinary way is any response. If they say, why did you do so-and-so? If it was they there, or if it's they in here, that appears to be your voice of conscience, your better judgment, your own decisions you made. Why did you do that? If you give any ordinary response to that question, all the way from, I don't know, or it's none of your business, or hey, take a leap. All of those ordinary responses, and it will encourage, it certainly will not stop, continual inquiries for further elaboration. That doesn't sound like guilt. How come nobody can get off the guilt train? How come there is no cure for remorse? I can't believe the way I treated my mother. Now she's dead and nothing I can do about it. Well, quit worrying about it. I can't. Well, try. I did. Try some more. I did. That doesn't sound like it. Forget Amtrak. Sometimes Amtrak, three-dimensionally, can even apparently get you to the end of a journey. You know, they have a wreck and you have to walk off. But these sorts of things, there are no end to guilt trains, remorse expresses. They go on and on and on. But there is a way in which you can respond. You can answer questions. We're absolutely out of time, so I guess I'll pick it up if we're ever going to at some other time, in such a way that the inquirers, no matter what you think they are, you got to remember, Punch and Judy, 2 players, 1 manipulator. No matter what you call it, the source of the questions is one, and it will work, no matter what appears to be, whether it was your conscience, your better judgment, the voice of your departed mother, a priest or rabbi, or God knows what. You can respond in such a way that, at least for that question, they will not ask for further liberation. And you do that over a period of time and space, and they will soon quit asking you any damn questions at all. And then talk about lonely. Woo! But, you know, getting out of the city and living in the bushes, it's not a pretty sight, so. Good weekend.